Welcome, everybody. This is the filmmaker roundtable for AfroPop, the Ultimate Cultural Exchange for season 16. And today we are honored to have a roundtable of all the filmmakers whose films will be featured on the series. AfroPop, the Ultimate Cultural Exchange, broadcasts on World and streams on PBS Plus, and it starts April 1st, and each film will be rolled out every Monday afterwards. And I think just to introduce the films a little bit, we'll show a trailer for the series for this upcoming season.
How people gonna remember you?
I kept telling myself that freedom is a state of mind.
Where am I?
AfroPop, the Ultimate Cultural Exchange, Season 16, invites you to explore justice, hope, and redemption through a collection of Afro-futuristic narratives and reflective documentary films.
This call is from a federal prison.
A mother's fight to rebuild community unjustly stripped away.
I am home, but I am not free. I am not free because my sisters are not free.
Commuted, directed by Naila Jefferson and produced in collaboration with Danielle Metz. An imaginative girl's journey to becoming a superhero. Supamoto, directed by Lakarian Wainaina. A motley crew stuck in the afterlife.
No one stays here forever.
But how do we leave if we don't know what brought us here in the first place?
Kati Kati, directed by Mbiti Masia.
The first flood, 100 and some people came up out of this cemetery. Daddy came up.
And the impact of flooding on a historic Black community. Freedom Hill, directed by Resita Cox. This season of AfroPop captures resilience and hope to illustrate the global Black experience. AfroPop, the Ultimate Cultural Exchange.
So exciting. And on the call today, we have all the filmmakers, and we're all in different time zones. So this is truly the global Black experience. We have filmmakers from Kenya, New Orleans, are you from North Carolina? Rosita, are you calling from North Carolina? Okay, and I'm in New York, so here we are. And what I want to do is basically just do a little bio of you, just to introduce you to the audience that's watching the clips. So first up of the AfroPop Ultimate Cultural Exchange Season 16 will be the film Commuted, and that will broadcast on April 1st. And it's a co-presentation with America Reframed, the America Reframed series. And the director, Naila Jefferson, is a native New Orleans filmmaker, intrigued and inspired by the enduring human spirit, whose films span fiction and nonfiction. Naila's recent work includes Descended from the Promised Land, The Legacy of Black Wall Street. Her acclaimed work has been distributed domestically and internationally on the film festival circuit, theatrically and televised. Naila's debut documentary, Vanishing Pearls, The Oystermen of Point a la Hache. Is that correct?
Point a la Hache. Mm-hmm.
Point a la Hache. That's my French for you. Told the story of little-known African-American oyster fishing community in Louisiana in the aftermath of the 2010 BP oil spill. The film is streamed on Netflix and the Urban Movie Channel. So welcome, Naila.
Thank you.
And then the next film that we have in the series is Supamoto, which will broadcast on April 8th. And just a quick note for people, this is the first time, or it's been the first time in a long time, that we're actually inviting back narratives. So for filmmakers out there who are listening who are narrative filmmakers, please know that your voices and your filmmaking genre is welcome on AfroPop, and feel free to submit your feature films. But Supermoto is by Lucarian Wainaina, a Kenyan filmmaker born in Moscow, Russia, and lives and works in Nairobi, Kenya. Lucarian is marking his 7th year working as a professional film, TV director, and cinematographer. In this time, he has gathered a wealth of experience and showcased his talents in various productions. As a cinematographer, he has also worked on a number of documentaries and commercials and has directed TV's house both drama and sitcoms that are currently gracing local TV stations in Kenya and television commercials as well. He has done a number of short films, his film Between the Lines being one of his first short films, later became the first Kenyan film to be projected on an IMAX screen in Kenya and got him a nomination at the AMCVA Awards 2015 for Best New Online Media. So welcome, Lucarian. The next program on AfroPop will be Kati Kati by Mbithi Messiah. And that will be broadcast on April 15th. And again, another narrative. So as I said before, we are opening and spreading our palette. Born and raised in Nairobi, filmmaker, writer, and artist Mbithi Messiah. Am I pronouncing your last name correctly?
It's Masia.
Masia. Thank you.
Yeah.
Mbithi Masia began his career in advertising. After joining the highly acclaimed experimental art collective Just a Band, he left his role as an agency art director to focus on film and music. Over the course of 4 years, he worked on several video installations, including Kudishnayo. Correct me. Is that correct?
Kudishnayo.
Kudishnayo.
Yeah.
Don't laugh.
No, I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing at the names
funny.
because
This is global.
we never think about
It's all good. It's all good. Which was hosted in the Rush Gallery in New York in 2012. His entry in the 2015 edition of the 48-hour film project It's Been a While won the Audience Award and is one of Nairobi's featured selections. His direction of music videos has earned him recognition from local and international press, such as the New York Times, Huffington Post, Fader, and OK Player, as well as being highlighted by Google. Kati Kati is his first feature film. And closing out our series this year is Freedom Hill, which will be broadcast on April 22nd. And it's a co-presentation with the Local USA series. And Rosita Cox is an Emmy Award-winning documentary filmmaker and producer. Her films are a poetic portrayal of her community's irrepressible spirit and resilience in the face of racism. Rosita's documentary film work is people-based, meaning not only features unique personal stories, but also prioritizes relationships and is constantly moving to reimagine an equitable filmmaking model. Born and raised in the South, her films center Southern Black communities and use them as a lens to examine topics ranging from environmental justice to racial justice. With a degree in journalism from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, Rosita started her career as a storyteller in TV news, as a reporter in North Carolina, and later in Chicago. Rosita was awarded a 2023 Midwest Emmy for her work as director on WTTW series Firsthand, Life After Prison. So, welcome, filmmakers. It's good to have you in the room. And what I'd like to do, because this is more or less a roundtable, I'm not going to be moderating per se, and then you answer questions. I have questions, of course, but I'd really like this to also be a discussion amongst the four of you as well as filmmakers and creatives. But I would like you to sort of start off, and I'm just going to throw it to, well, I'll start with you, Nayla, since you're the first one off the page for AfroPop this season.
Yeah.
To just sort of give us the elevator pitch of your film, and then also what led you to the film? What led you to your story for Community?
It's so funny. I haven't pitched this film in so long.
Okay, well, don't feel like
no, I can do it. I can do it. I can do it. It's just so funny to put myself back in that space. Well, Commuted is a story of Danielle Metz. She's the mother of two. And in 1992, at the age of 26, she was sentenced to triple life plus 20 years for nonviolent drug offenses associated with her husband. Like I said, she had two small children, Carl and Glenisha, and they were 7 and 3 years old. And when Danielle was sentenced, she was sent more than 2,000 miles away to serve out her triple life sentence in Dublin, California. Danielle ended up serving 23 of those years. And throughout that time, her family worked tirelessly to get her home. And finally, President Obama granted her clemency through the Clemency Initiative. And so Danielle, along with about 1,600 other nonviolent drug offenders, were offered the chance to come back home. And so she returns to New Orleans. And in that time, she tries to reconnect with her children. And that's what Commuted is about. It's about a woman in her 50s trying to find her footing in the free world. And we had the opportunity, not just the opportunity, the great pleasure of following Danielle for about 6.5 years. And her story is tremendous. Just to see who she was when I met her, just very unsure of where to go and what to do. And like she would always say, trying to figure this freedom thing out, to where she is now. She's an advocate, she's a prison abolitionist, and she's doing real work to get other women back home and reconnected with their families. Not quite an elevator pitch. It was a long elevator ride, but you get the gist of it.
No, that's perfect. That's perfect. And so what got you in touch with her?
Well, at the time we were attending the same church, actually, and our pastor reached out to me, and he was like, he knew I was a filmmaker, and he said, "Do you know Danielle Metz?" And I was like, no. He said, "Well, she has a story, and you're a storyteller, so I think you all should get together." And it wasn't necessarily that easy. I was kind of excited to start, but Danielle was someone who had just come home from 23 years of prison. As you'll see in her story, she goes to prison. She was betrayed by a family member. So there's a lot of trauma and just a lot that she has to work through in order to really welcome people back in, to embrace people back into her life, especially new people like myself. And so that's kind of why our journey took as long as it did to make this film. A lot of it was getting to know each other. But I'm really grateful for that time, because within that time, I knew that this was a story that couldn't look like any other prison documentary. We really wanted it to be immersive. We really wanted to be about the internal experience, her emotional experience. And so that's what we focused on and Commuted. So I think everyone will kind of be able to step inside Danielle's shoes and experience the emotions that she's experiencing as she's reintegrating into the free world.
Perfect. So interesting. Thank you, Nayla. I'm going to throw it to Lucarian to talk about Supermoto. What is? You talk to us a little bit about. You're the writer as well.
I was the originator of the story. We did get about 5 other writers to come on board. I think the short of it, Supermoto is a story of a terminally ill girl who has a few months to live, and her dream is to become a superhero. And so the community and her family set out to make her a superhero. It was a really tough movie to pitch, mainly because everyone hears superhero and they immediately think VFX heavy and stuff. But I just wanted to do a realistic superhero film and base it on the love I have for my family, the love I have for movie making, and the love I have for comics. So it was just these three love of my life coming together and mashing it into one single story.
It's beautiful, and it's such a touching and uplifting film. And it's for children. It's for family. It's really like a family-oriented film. So we're thrilled to have it as a part of AfroPop this season. Thank you for that.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, of course. And and I'll now pass it on to Nadisi, who is the director of Kati Kati. Tell us a little bit about Kati Kati, which is very different from
Yeah,
Superhero.
yeah. I was just about to say, like, it's a bit of a pivot to go from Nicarion's nice family-friendly movie to mine. But so basically, Kati Kati is a story of an amnesiac who wakes up in the afterlife and finds herself in this lodge, stuck with a few other people in this wilderness lodge, trying to figure out why she's there, trying to see if she can remember who she was, and also just kind of learning why everyone else is there as they work through uh, different things. And that's, I think, the long and short of the film itself. But in terms of where the story came from, um, it came from a place of grief. At the time, I had lost a very close friend. Um, Suicide, and I was dealing with a lot of thoughts of grief and shame, guilt, a lot of these things. And the film came from one morbid moment during one of the wake meetings where someone said, "Oh, she's now in a better place. She's left all these things behind." And the question was, like, that I posed to myself was, is death really that release, or what if you were forced to deal with your baggage before moving on to the next uh, stage in life? And so that's kind of where the story came from. Yeah, as I said, it's a hard pivot from Nicarion's
But
superhero to
it's such an incredibly um, evocative film about and redemption, really about finding and redemption too. So thank you for allowing us to have it as a part of this series for this season.
No, thank
And
you for having
finally,
me.
no, thank you. And then so finally, Rizita, tell me, I've
It's
also
Rosita. It's Rosita. A lot of people like to throw a little extra spice on it, but it's just Rosita.
Rosita.
My family calls me Sita. I am the director and producer of Freedom Hill. Freedom Hill explores the environmental racism that is washing away the entire eastern part of North Carolina, but told through the lens of Princeville, which also happens to be the first town chartered by Black people in the country. And it's a town that's not too far away from where I grew up. But it just explores kind of like where our Black communities are in relation to where our ancestors, had to settle once they freed themselves after the Civil War, and how that puts us now on the front lines of the climate chaos that we're living through right now.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rosita. Yeah, it's like truly, we're all globally dealing with that climate crisis right now. It's happening. Um, so now that we've all sort of learned a little bit more about your films from the sources, I just want to open it up a little bit. Do any of you, because this is a round table, I don't want you to look at me like I'm the only person that's going to be asking questions. Do you all have questions of one another? Feel free to just sort of jump in there.
I have questions. I always have questions. I'm always the first person to unmute. I'm curious, Nayla, am I saying that correctly?
Nayla.
Okay. I'm curious what the relationship building process was with your main character. As you mentioned, she was just coming home, and y'all were introduced kind of like by a community member you have in common, but you were just getting to know each other through this film. So I would love to know what your relationship building process was like.
Yeah, so for me, I was ready to kind of just jump in and shoot, but that's that just didn't work. And I've tried to be very transparent about like all the mistakes that we made during this process because I do feel like working with Danielle just kind of opened up my mind to, well, my eyes to a lot of inequity within the documentary space, and so we just wanted to be in a place where we were felt like we were on equal footing and sharing a power. Because I think, coming into it, even as filmmakers, independent filmmakers, a lot of times we think of ourselves as powerless because we're always trying to get distribution. We're always, trying to get money, things like that. But in the space when we're working with our protagonists, really we are in so much more of a powerful space. And so just kind of thinking about that, and Danielle having so many questions about the process, who's in charge, who gets a credit, this and that. We just started to have really open conversations. So not just about the process of filmmaking, but also just about her life. And I think it was an opportunity for both of us to learn, for her to kind of learn this business, for me to learn about her experience without the cameras rolling, without any of that. And so we were able to, in that time, develop a friendship. And I think just a real care for one another, and really treat this as a collaboration rather than just a director protagonist relationship. And so that's what we did. And, sometimes I sit and I record with my phone, or she didn't want to do that day. We just sit and talk. But again, in that experience, I was able to she'd just be talking, like she'd just be riffing. And one day she'd be like, yeah, because when I was working as a 411 operator in prison and this and that, and I was like, wait, like when we were dialing 411, those are the people that we were talking to. That's who was answering the phone. And so just like a lot of stories like this will come up. And so again, we just wanted to, I learned in that time that Danielle, the way that she got through that triple life sentence, the way that she was able to wake up every day, is that she had to kind of project herself and think herself outside of those walls. So it was very much using her imagination, relying on her faith, all of that. And so we wanted to bring that into the film. So I feel like this is very personal, and the film feels like Danielle in a way that it wouldn't feel like anybody else. But just to answer your question, I know that was a long way of doing it, but to answer your question, I think it was just a lot of sitting down and giving ourselves time to talk to one another and really get to know one another without the end goal being getting it all on camera that day. Because I think a lot of times in this work, we're always thinking like racing against time, trying to hurry up and get it. And I definitely was one of those people. I never thought I'd be working on this film for like 6.5 years. But I do think the time that we had together was a great gift, and it made the film just kind of uniquely the Danielle Metz experience that it is. I hope I answered your question. Okay. I guess I can ask a question. LaCarrion, am I saying your name right? I have a New Orleans accent. Okay.
No, you got it right. You nailed it.
Okay, wonderful. So it's funny because I work in fiction and nonfiction, and I very much I love magical realism and things like that. Can you just tell me and I hope I didn't miss this in your intro, can you tell me kind of more about what brought you to this story, what your inspirations were? Yeah.
Yeah, so before coming up with Supermodo, I was in a very weird place. I was dealing with a lot of family issues, personal issues. Growing up, I didn't have a really good relationship with my family. I was always the black sheep. So when you're much older, you do a lot of reflection, and a lot of things that I saw growing up that I didn't really understand because maybe I was younger. And one of the things that I noted was the relationship between my mother and my sister. I never understood it honestly until I was a grown up, and it really stuck with me. And at the same time, I was in a place of I was lost as a filmmaker. I didn't know the heads of tales of what I'm gonna do, if I'm gonna do anything. But all I knew was I just loved movies, and I didn't know the path that I would take. And as a creative, you just lie one day and you mash all these things together. And so I wanted to do a film that honors the relationship of my mother and my sister. But at the same time, whenever I make movies, I don't try to fit in just one theme. I mix in a lot of things, because that's how my mind works. So at the same time, with my family, I was thinking about filmmaking, and someone joked because I love comics, and someone joked like, when are you gonna grow up and leave these comics? And I told them, man, people are making money out of these, and it's a passion, and it's something people are, attached to, and I am one of those guys. And so it naturally just fit together. And then while we were writing the film, I thought I was basing it on my family until we went and visited a children's home, a children's ward here in Kenya for children with terminal illness. And it really hit me because I realized how selfish I was as a filmmaker. I was just thinking about me and my story and my expression. And this character that I created, never realized that there's an actual child like that, and many of them. And so, halfway through writing the story, I think it was three-quarter way, almost done. We decided to restructure the entire film to honor these kids that we just met and how their lives have changed ever since the diagnosis. And so that became our new driving force with the writers. Like, how do we honor these kids and the parents who go through all this? And that's how the film came to be.
That's beautiful.
I had a question for Rosita. Um, the because I think your story is different from Nayla's in that Nayla's is a single subject and yours is a whole community. So I was curious about your connection to that community, if there was one before you went to the story, and then how, because so I have different documentary friends in the documentary world, and I've always been interested in that thing where you can either tell the story of a person, but you can tell the story of many. How do you collectively decide what the story of a community is? I know this one is very pointed with environmental um, racism. So I was curious about your approach to how you decide a point of view for a community rather than of a subject. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'm from Eastern North Carolina. Us in North Carolina call it the 252. That's our area code. And it's Eastern North Carolina is the poorest part of the state. It's the blackest part of the state. That's not by accident, and it's also the part of the state where all the water flows to when it floods, right? When we have hurricanes. And so growing up, I survived the floods that we see in the film. Hurricane Floyd was like, I was a child, but I remember that one. And then Hurricane Matthew happened to come my first year as a TV news reporter. So I covered it. And I also rode through my hometown in a National Guard boat. And the only thing you could see was the Staple of Church. You could touch the stoplights. And so, yeah, when I wanted to growing up, I didn't have the language or the understanding. I just knew those three separate facts, right? That like Eastern North Carolina's poor, Eastern North Carolina's black, and Eastern North Carolina floods. I didn't have the term environmental racism. I didn't understand that like the way that the Army Corps is built our levees actually is flawed in design. And so like we were always set up to kind of flood. And then I also didn't realize that the areas we were in low-lying areas because of where our ancestors had to settle and what was given to them to kind of farm after the Civil War. So I wanted to tell this story when I connected those dots. I wanted to tell everybody in the world, especially the people that I grew up with, because we all experienced this, but we couldn't really put words around it. And so I was sent to Princeville as a TV news reporter to cover the flood damage of Hurricane Matthew in 2016. And so at this point, I'm a young adult. I think that when we're young, I thought that I knew everything. I thought that I'd gone to college and I had my political awakening and I was so black. And then like I arrived in Princeville and I see the signage, which the signs had actually just gotten there. But I see the signs that say, first town charter about black people in the country. And I'm like, what? This is crazy. I grew up just an hour away from here. Not even a full hour. And no one brought me here on a field trip. We went to Confederate monuments and ships and all that stuff in the South. And you know, when I then years later connected the dots of all those things, the news, the news at that time wasn't the correct container. It wouldn't have allowed me to tell this community story. You know, it wouldn't have allowed me to explore the nuance and the complexity of the first Black town being underwater. It was just a 1 minute news story, you know? And so that had a lot to do with my desire to present a community portrait. And I'm gonna connect this all. I go on a lot of long rants, but I promise I'm getting to a point. But that is also how like my experience growing up in Eastern North Carolina was. It always felt like, you know, we rode bikes, we had cookouts all the time. It was always just like we had nothing to do essentially but be in community. And so I wanted to show people that we still had this like vibrant these vibrant communities in the face of these storms. And so that's why I chose the community portrait as opposed to one single story, because also it affects so many of us. And I think that like the traditional way we've been taught to hold stories is to, you know, elevate one voice and have a central main character. But I'm always thinking about how to decolonize those things that they taught me in journalism school. And so I'm like, how many voices can I fit in 30 minutes is my approach. And your other question about how I connected to Princeville specifically, like I said, Eastern North Carolina is made up of these really small towns. Together we make probably the population of one collective city, but it's really small Black towns, and they're the rural towns. This is where your Black farms are and all of the beauty countryside land is. And we all kind of know each other because we all kind of relate to the same lived experience of being like this in this socially isolated and economically isolated area of the state. And so the way I cast my films is so funny because growing up in a small community, I didn't realize how golden this was until I moved to a big city and recognized everybody didn't really have that telephone line, the country telephone line. But I just put out a word. I'm like, I want to do a story about the environmental racism. I think I put it on a Facebook status like years ago. And I wanted to use, in North Carolina, we call it the Black Town. I wanted to tell it through the lens of Princeville. And so my godmom called me and was like, hey, I saw your Facebook status. And then within like 3 seconds, she had three-way the mayor and Bobby Mayer. And she was like, hold on, wait, I'll call a mayor. Wait. And then I was just like, wait, I'm not ready yet. And so it was just a telephone line of like Black people in the country calling each other. You know, me telling my community elders and being like, do you know anyone in Princeville? And I think like, you know, I got on the phone with the mayor, and then one of my aunties had like, you know, a church friend who went to church in Princeville. So then I was able to get in touch with the church community. And from there, everyone pointed me toward my main character, Marquetta. They were like, have you connected with Marquetta? Have you connected with Marquetta? And I'm like, who's Marquetta? Let me go find her next. And so it was really just like a community, like word of mouth. Hey, I want to do this film, and I want to tell it from a particular angle, which is, you know, like Black voices, Black resiliency, and all that good stuff. So long response to a very good question. Thank you.
Loving this. I have a question actually for Lucarian or Mbithi. I'm curious to know about the Kenyan filmmaking scene. Is it, you know, particularly Black Africans? Is it a strong narrative scene, or is it a documentary scene, or is it both? You know, as far as like how, you know, Black Kenyan filmmakers express themselves filmically. Either one of you or both at the same time, doesn't matter.
Okay, I guess I can go first. So basically, the whole scene, like I wouldn't call it even an industry, because I feel like that betrays its size. It's a scene, and a scene of very dedicated people, because we are literally doing this for the love. In that the resources are really not here. So stories are being bootstrapped through and through, in terms of just everyone kind of in all the filmmaker friends I have, and literally the scene is so small that we are all friends and we all know each other, and it's, I think, a mix, especially the last 10 years. It's a 50-50 split of documentary and fiction, and in a way, and I'm bringing up the last 10 years because I feel like that's when we've started breaking out internationally, where our stories have started getting seen internationally, respected, and in a way that, um, for lack of a better way to describe it, it doesn't feel voyeuristic. Because, like with foreign cinema, sometimes people, and I always had a problem with this, like the idea of peeping into another society, another culture, and just going away. Whereas what I think our stories that have been traveling, like Lucarian Supermoto and all, it's not that, oh, it's a Kenyan village, let me see that, but it's these universal human themes that are starting to come across in all the materials. We have our documentaries winning prizes at Sundance and other places, in the last 3-4 years, made by some fantastic filmmakers here in Kenya. Fiction work is traveling more and more. We're also producing a lot more for other African countries, like other African filmmakers are coming to make work here. So I think it's a scene that's more passion than anything, and looking forward to seeing where the stories go. But yeah, Karen, I don't know if you want to add anything, but that's my brief description of what I see the scene as.
Yeah, I kind of agree. It's definitely a scene. It's not big enough to be an industry, but we also cannot put aside the work that people have been doing because we've really been pushing. Like it's a labor of love. I think it's too young to define our industry because we still have so many strides to hit, but then there's still a uniqueness to our approach that hasn't been explored, not just by us but by everyone else. People watch from the outside watching in. So I still think there's a lot of room to grow, but I think our biggest impact has definitely been video on demand. I think that's what brought a rise for at least Kenyan filmmakers. I know a lot of Kenyan filmmakers that have gotten the opportunity to showcase their stuff because of platforms like Showmax or Netflix. And so I feel like that's a disruption at the moment because I really hoped we'd go through the cinema phase, first and really, grow organically. But we are a young industry that is going with the flow, and somehow one way or the other we will find our definition, and will be our definitions will be shorter. We won't have to. I feel like when an industry can be described shorter, then it really held its ground. But I'm very, very hopeful. Like we are not where we want to be, but thank goodness we're not where we used to be. Just a difference of 5 years has really made Kenyan industry something totally different, and it's exciting to watch, and I cannot wait to see where we're going for sure.
Fabulous. We can't either.
Oh, sorry. One other thing that I always like to bring up about the Kenyan film industry, it is literally rests on the shoulders of, and I think this is unlike many scenes of very fantastic women filmmakers. For the last 20, 30 years, this industry was built by them, directors and producers and writers. And it's one of those things where, like our Hall of Fame right now, it's 90% women and like 10% men. Like that's how it stands right now. And so I think that's a wonderful testament also to the Kenyan industry. Yeah.
Fabulous. Say some of their names so that we're aware of them.
Yeah.
Oh, the many. Like Judy Kibinge, Wanuri, who everyone knows from Rafiki, Wanuri Kahiu. There's Wanjiro Gendu. There's Karen, you can jump in. And then now, because also we want to go into even departments, like you're talking about editors, people like Frankie Ashiruka, who talk about people who have careers spanning 30 years, working in multiple countries, even on VFX, like one of the leading VFX artists who worked at Weta, she came back home, Yvonne Winde has become an industry figurehead in the post-production world, as well. So I'm jumping even department to department because to show you how it's not just like one particular thing. It's many. Producers are a million. I'm blanking, but a lot.
We have writers like Damaris Irongo, Volino Gutu. Like everywhere you spin around the industry, you'll find a great woman behind it. And it happened so organically. Like it wasn't like a force or like we went to the streets. It just happened and we turned our heads and our industry was built by these amazing women. And it's definitely an amazing thing to watch.
It's one of those things, you walk through people's houses, you see an Emmy in the corner and you're like, where did that come from? And stuff like that. So it's like, yeah. It's yeah.
That is so inspirational. Wow. Naila, I think you were trying to.
Yeah, I had a question, and Beefy. I had a question about your film, and I know you talked about moving through grief. And I don't know if you all, Regina King just did this whole interview when she talked about her son and his suicide and moving through grief. And she had this quote that I think became very popular around COVID, and like grief is love with no place to go. Anyway, I know like with Commuted, Danielle always says that it helped her kind of release some things, and it's helped her and her children talk about more things. So I guess this is a question for everybody, but I want to start with you and Beefy. How did kind of the work that you're doing, your filmmaking process, how did it help you kind of heal and move through those emotions? I know that's a heavy question, but I do think that there's a certain power that comes with filmmaking and storytelling and, testimony. So that was my question.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And, to be honest, and I felt kind of guilty about this because it kind of felt like the most expensive therapy session I could ever have imagined having. Like, I took a whole crew of people along with on my journey to understand things. And, that quote is, I think, very powerful. And I think this film was one of the places that I had to put that grief. I had to move it somewhere just to kind of put her spirit's energy somewhere, and also just kind of process a lot of things. Because it wasn't just the grief that came from the story. I was also using it as a chance to reflect on a few things about Kenyan society and community that I don't like. We are a very shame-based, driven society in many ways, and also on a national scale, we are very, I'd say, we forget. Like, it's just forget and move on is what we like to say. Even a lot of historical injustices are never reckoned with in Kenya. We just forget and move on. So I felt like this film just gave me a perfect place to take some of these bigger thoughts and kind of crystallize them into personal stories. So each character kind of is carrying a lot of thoughts from different parts of my life. So anyway, but to your question, it was definitely a place I put the grief into, just to help me understand the feeling. And I think that's even why the film ended up relating so much with so many people, because I was surprised, because it's a weird little movie, but people were really connecting with it. And I guess that's one of the universal things about this life we're going through. There's a lot of baggage and things we're carrying with us, and a lot of the time we don't even get a chance to reckon with it. And this film was kind of like a suggestion of, what if there was a way for you to just deal with your stuff? Yeah. Can hand it back to the rest of the room.
Well, I just want to say that it's been an incredible roundtable of extraordinary filmmakers here. We're more or less going to be closing out, but before we go, I want to ask each one of you, what's next? What do you have coming up? What are your plans? And
Oh, sorry. I was gonna answer the grief question too, but that also kind of leads into that closing question of what's next. I want it to be like many filmmakers or storytellers, because you don't do this work for any other reason unless you love it. But I wanted to be a storyteller from a youngin. Like I was in first grade, you know, scribbling in my journal, writing poems before I knew what poetry was, right? And I think that's never by chance. Like when you get something put in you, especially at a young age, like it feels like a life's calling, like a calling on your life. And I realized, you know, this work was way more than just film work when my healing became interwoven with like my film work, and how, like, you know, I'm from North Carolina, but Carol, when you were like, are you in North Carolina? I did live in Chicago for a long time, but Freedom Hill literally brought me back home. And then my next piece is literally bringing me back home, because I'm back in my hometown. And so I'm working on my first feature called Basketball Heaven. And it's about, you know, my hometown is the single greatest producer of NBA talent in the world, Kinston, North Carolina. But it's also about, you know, the community and the love and the support in these kind of, you know, Freedom Hill, but using basketball this time as the way in. And so that film also follows my personal healing journey. I fought spirit and God on this. I didn't want to put myself in this movie, but as we probably all experience, my healing and my grief and all of the things I work through are so often in tandem with my film work that I'm doing, that it would be hard to tell Kinston's story without including my own story, because through the same network of community coaches and communal love and Black teachers, is how I survived my way out of a chaotic childhood and home life, right? And so that's about Heaven highlights that, and that's what's up next.
Can't wait. Wonderful.
I've heard of Basketball Heaven. I've heard of Freedom Hill too, obviously. But I think you won. Didn't you win at the New Orleans Film Festival? Okay, all right. So I've been in your presence, and I was like, I know her name. Okay, now congratulations.
What's next for you, Nayla?
Oh, what's next? I mean, to Resita's point, like it's funny how these films find us. Because it's especially in documentary, I don't think that I've always been approached with stories. I've never kind of read the paper and be like, oh, I want to tell this story. Or even if I have, those aren't the things that have come to fruition. They haven't panned out. But I can't talk too much about the documentary I'm working on right now because we're still figuring out some things. But it is about some community artists here in New Orleans. And one thing that I find myself like, and I'm not going to be in the story, but it's interesting because they're navigating some of the same things that I'm navigating, trying to be independent, figuring out who to align yourself with. And just, I think it's weird that I'm facing the same artist journey. So I very much see myself in the story, and I'm asking, I think I'm the right person to tell this story because I can ask those specific questions. I'm not just sitting back and like looking at the art getting made. I'm kind of asking like, about the systems and the practices that we want to put forth, and how to sustain and not perpetuate problematic practices that are often used in this space. So there's one, and then I'm actually also writing. I made one short film before, but I mean, documentaries take so long, I kind of forgot I knew how to write. So I looked up and I was like, okay, wait a minute. let's take a minute. So that's this year I've committed to finishing the feature that I started. And then I also want to shoot a short this year. So yeah, I'm really challenging myself to like get those things out the door this year. And I'm really excited about it.
Excellent. Fabulous. And Lucarian, you're on set, right, for your next film.
I'm on set. On set. I'm working on a TV show. Hence, my background is keep on changing. I'm just trying to run away from crew. So I just went across the location to a restaurant just to find some quiet time. So I'm working in TV. I went into TV to take a break because of I felt Famodo really, it took a lot from me, and somehow TV became like my resting period. But I've always been working on two other films to complete my trilogy. Supermodel was based on my mother and my sister. I was writing at the same time. I was writing a film based on my dad and my brother, and then the final film is based on me. But I haven't. I've been so afraid to finish them because of how exposed it's gonna leave me. And so I've been delaying and pushing them. But I feel like I'm finally ready to unleash them. So hopefully I'll go into pre-production end of the year for one of them. Scripts are almost ready, and hopefully I'll be bold enough to finish and release them to the world.
Congratulations. Congratulations. And Mbisi, what's next for you?
Yeah, I guess circling back to film being expensive therapy, I had also taken a break a little bit. I made a short film uh, that helped me kind of declutter my mind and the complicated feelings I was having towards this art form and space. And, I think it just going back again to Nayla's, other question. The short film was a magical realist short about a kid with this power to teleport, built around experiences and conversations of child abuse that I had with people, conversations that I had, and past experiences. And I was always scared that the specificity of my stories, because sometimes I go too granular, would always alienate audiences. But as I spoke about with Katikati, it's like the more specific I got, the more I felt like audiences pulled the emotion out. And so the short was literally meant for me. And yet it did that thing again. And because I was just getting some, am I allowed to cuss? I'm sorry. I was getting some stuff off my chest. And then it's kind of now given me the confidence to visit another story I had kept aside, that happened. The reason why I even took a break after Katikati was that the same situation happened again, and I lost another friend through the same circumstances. And it kept bringing up, like those two friends both struggled with bipolar condition, and it kept bringing up these thoughts and emotions about just mental well-being, and how we grew up, because I think nowadays there's a lot more information and knowledge about it, but growing up it was, yeah, go to church and the demons will be cast out and you'll be fine anyway. But so the film, now I'm revisiting her story, and it's still going to be a surreal, weird trip of a story, but that's what's next. It's currently called Saudade, Portuguese title, which will change along the way.
Wonderful. Wow. Well, I wish you all continued success and digging in your next journey as your films evolve. This concludes the Filmmaker Roundtable for AfroPop, the Ultimate Cultural Exchange for season 16. And for those of you who are listening in to this incredible roundtable discussion, I hope by what these filmmakers have put forth that you're even more intrigued and wanting to watch what they have created so far for AfroPop season 16. So thank you, Naila and Lakarian and Mbithi and Visita, for your films, for your work. And I will say adieu until next season. Enjoy AfroPop season 16. Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much.